South Africa, as a developing nation, relies on a number of economic indicators to better understand where it stands as a country and how it is doing in terms of meeting its national goals and objectives, and furthermore understand how its performance is relative to the global economy. Now, the GDP is a crucial and foundational economic indicator in that it provides insight into the economic health of the country. It further shows us where the economy is growing and delineates on where the growth is happening. To delve more into this, I'm joined by Statistics South Africa's National Accounts Chief Director, Dr. Bokang Vumbugani Lepolesa. She will be telling us today about the second quarter GDP 2025 findings. Doctor, it is such a lovely day and a pleasure to meet you. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Nathaniel, for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm doing good generally.
As am I. So, can you just tell us, in layman's term, what the GDP is and what information it provides to the public?
Okay, so the GDP is one of the indicators that are normally used to gauge the performance of a nation's economy. We can simply define it as the total value of goods and services produced within a specific economy. In South Africa specifically, Stats SA collects data. It draws from different sources of data and compiles the quarterly and annual GDP for decision making. It aids decision making, provides evidence that aids decision making as well as policy development. And some of the questions that we try to address include, in a specific quarter, would include, for instance, the industries that are growing, industries that are shrinking, the sort of investments that we have seen come in the country.
Very interesting. What can you tell us about how the economy performed for the second quarter of 2025?
Okay, so in the second quarter of 2025, we saw an increase of 0.8% in economic growth, and this was from a low 0.1% that we saw in the first quarter. And this was because of a mix of things, specifically because of the growth in 8 of the 10 industries that we normally report on. At the 4 of the good performance or the good performing industries, we saw manufacturing, mining, and trade come to the fore. What is important and to just remember is that mining and manufacturing had actually contracted for 2 consecutive quarters. So the improvement that we are seeing now is really a good one, and it's most welcome. On the downside, we saw construction and transport contracting, with construction contracting because of the non-residential and residential buildings. Transport, on the other side, was adversely affected by land transport as well as support services.
And what would you say were the major drivers of growth on the expenditure side of the economy?
So the expenditure side was primarily influenced by growth in household consumption as well as imports. So those were the 2 main drivers. But we did see that government consumption also participated, or somewhat, although relatively smaller, but it injected positive growth also in the expenditure.
And what was household spending like in the second quarter?
So what's interesting about households is that for 5 consecutive quarters, we did see an expansion in household consumption. And this time around, what we realized was that the expenditure was cross-cutting. So it was across all the expenditure items that we normally report on. But what mostly drove the growth that we saw, the significant growth that we saw, were the miscellaneous resources, and these include mostly the insurances. So we saw a lot of growth specifically in that category. But overall, growth in expenditure items was across the board, with an exception, of course, of 2 items, these being alcoholic beverages as well as housing, electricity, and water. So those 2 contracted, but the rest of the items increased.
Thank you very much. That was Statistics South Africa's National Accounts Chief Director, Dr. Bokang Vumbugane Lepolisa, just giving us the latest finding for the second quarter GDP 2025. You can find this publication, the full scope of it, therefore, on www.statsa.gov.za. But also, don't forget to like and follow us on all our social media platforms. My name is Nhlagani Mahlangu. From me and the rest of my team, we'll see you next time.